issue 1, issue 2. Oh, we're so close. I'm like a day away from launching this thing. Finally, thank you for your patience. Awesome. All right, we are back with yet another Q&A. Thank you so much for anyone who sent questions in. I've got a ton of questions here, and because I am a technological wizard, I am using a laptop today for the first time. Well, I got 33% battery. So this battery in this laptop lasts for less than an hour with a full charge. So if I get through this, it'll be a miracle. I'm one person with one opinion, so if I say something that rankles you, that's fine. That's probably gonna keep happening, because I have a tendency of rankling people for some reason. So I've got, I don't know how many questions here, probably too many, but I'm gonna get started. The first question, yeah, it's gonna rankle some people. The first question I had was, I made a comment recently about not liking the Fuji E100 series. Now, I don't remember the designation, E100, E100V, E100F, E100T, something like that. There's a whole bunch of these in the series now. I had the original version of that camera. In fact, I was at the Palm Springs Photo Festival and I had to go to, leave from Palm Springs and go to Australia. And this is when that camera was first announced, and someone from Fuji was at the festival, and I called in some favors and said, man, I'm leaving. I would love to get my hands on that camera. I got it, the first generation of this E100, and I was like, this is gonna be my all-time favorite camera for basically daily carry. This is gonna be magical. Less than 2 weeks later, I was on stage in Australia at the Head On Photo Festival. I was not really the person being featured on stage. I just happened to be standing there with the director of the festival, and I had the camera on my shoulder, and there were probably 300 people in the audience, and I turned to move, and the camera flew off my shoulder and landed on the stage floor and just smashed into a million pieces, and like 300 people just groaned and looked at me and started laughing. So that was, the first version only lasted 2 weeks. However, within that 2 weeks, I realized that that camera was not going to work for me, that I really didn't like that camera. So what did I do? I learned from my mistakes and I went out and I bought the next one, because that's just what we do. When the photographer brain says, I think I can make this work, and everyone around you goes, no, I don't think so, probably not. I think you're misguided and somewhat delusional, you clown. So I bought the next one, and I still don't like that camera. I don't like any camera in that series. I'm a fan of Fujifilm cameras, especially the XTs and the X Pros and the new giant 50 megapixel and the 100 megapixel. Those are great. If you're a commercial photographer, you need file size like that. Those are wonderful cameras, and Fuji deserves a lot of credit. The E100 series cameras to me don't work. That is a camera that suffers from that small chip. You cannot separate subject matter well with that camera. There are exactly 2 people in the world who I know, since that camera came out, exactly 2 people who use it well, whose work I look at and I say, that is professional photography done by someone with training who knows what they're doing. Every single other person I've seen hyping that camera and using it and showing their work online, it's just not good, in my opinion. The work is not good. It's snapshotty, it's landscapey, it's buildings that don't move, it's urban abstract landscapes, it's all the stuff that you can use anything for, and that's why they like the camera, is that it's so tiny and small. Great, you don't have to carry anything, it's amazing. But if you do the kind of work that I do, the camera doesn't function. It's not fast enough. The small chip doesn't look right. I don't like it. There's nothing I like about that camera, and I know that there's probably not a whole lot of people out there saying that, but it's true. And it didn't work for me in any way, shape, or form. I never made decent photographs with it. Too much of a lag, didn't like the finder, small chip, no separation. The lens was okay. I mean, the depth of field change from f2 to f22 was like not nearly what it needed to be. So I'm not a fan of it. Sorry, Fuji. My X-T2s are fine. My X-T4 is fine. I have friends who shoot the GS, GFT, GFX, whatever those giant things are. They love them. They're great photographers who know what they're doing. They're pixel peeping. They've got demanding commercial clients. They're working for brands at a high level. They're sponsored. They're good people. They love the cameras if they love it. The only people I know Like I said, I know 2 people worldwide doing assignment work with that E100 who do a good job, and the rest of them are sort of consumer, prosumer, or online people who talk about it a lot, and they get all the right straps and soft releases and hoods and all this stuff, but then you look at the work and you go, yeah, this isn't very good. Question number 2, which I have listed here is 10. That's because I am mathematically illiterate, and you should know that by now. I got a D in college algebra. I think I told you that before. It was a mercy grade just to get rid of me, which is what we did back in the day. People could talk about things like mercy grades up front. Who cares, man? Now you'd probably get in trouble. Okay, I mentioned this in the last film, but it's worth mentioning again. I have a lot of people reaching out to me asking about getting good in photography. And I get it. We have a dream that we visualize. We have an idea of who we are as creatives and as photographers, and we're out there trying to achieve something. And that something is very difficult to define for a lot of us, because what is a good photograph? Does your mom like it? Did you make a picture of your niece and nephew and your mom and your grandparents and everyone else goes, oh my God, that's amazing. That's a success. But in your mind, you may say, that's not a really good photograph. They just don't know what they're looking at. They're looking 100% on subject matter. These are kids. I can take a picture of their feet and they would love it. But the rest of us are out there and we're like, we're hunting something that's elusive, hard to define, and almost impossible to put our finger on. The vast majority of photographers working today, and I don't mean this as an insult, the vast majority of photographers working are not great. Great is reserved for people who are truly great. There's a reason that the word legend lives. Sebastião Salgado, as a documentary photographer, is what I would call a great photographer, but it is a combination of ingredients that go far beyond the actual photographs. Sebastião Salgado, at one point, if I don't have my data wrong, he had a 7-year assignment from Rolling Stone. Salgado would work in 10-year increments on his projects, whether it was Workers or any other Genesis. He would work for 10 years at a time. He would come to organizations like Kodak for funding and had a roadmap of the entire lifespan of what the project would be. This is where I'm going. This is who I'm working with. This is what's going to happen. This is how long I'm going to be there. This is who's making the prints. This is where who's doing the book deal. These are the museums and galleries where this is going to be exhibited. This is a roadmap for the next 10 years. Nobody else was doing that as far as I know. There were people working in a similar theme, but he was unique. So that is a great person because he's a household name. My mother, I did a test on my mom before she started having memory problems, and I brought up that name, and my mom knew the name Sebastião Salgado. I've never spoken to my mom about Sebastião Salgado, but just through percolating and circumstances, his name was in front of her at some point. That is an incredible thing for a documentary photographer to have a name like that. He's great. I'm not great. I was never great. The vast majority of people I know, even if they're successful full-time working photographers, some of them might call themselves great. I do have photographers who will legitimately, friends anyway, who will look at you with a straight face and tell you without blinking, because they actually believe it, they will say, I am one of the best photographers to ever walk the face of the earth, because I've seen it happen. I saw a photographer friend of mine do this to my wife's father, because he innocently asked the question, hey, you're a photographer? And he's probably bored to death. And he was like, really, are you any good? And this photographer looked at him and said, I'm one of the best photographers that's ever been. And my wife and I looked at each other like, oi, you can't say that. You never ever say that about yourself. That's just called ridiculous. So if you are trying to get good, you cannot do 7 things at once. You cannot make your main photographs, work on Instagram, make YouTube films. You can't do all of it at the same time. It's what I don't know anyone who's doing that. Is Sebastião Salgado out like making YouTube films? No, as far as I know, he's not. Is he on Instagram? Doubtful. I would assume maybe someone in his studio has an Instagram feed that works for him. I don't know. I don't know the guy. They're making projects and work. And oh, by the way, to do a project like a Salgado, do you realize how much research that takes? R&D, months, fixers, planning, travel logistics, access. You've got to have a team. It's a full-on effort. And no one is like just willy-nilly shooting for 5 minutes and then spending 4 hours making a YouTube film to do that. So I think the vast majority of people working today will never get great. But what they have going for them is a distracted audience who doesn't know great. And that's what's keeping everything afloat right now. Because most of the squeaky wheel stuff I see that gets huge traction and buzz that people are talking about, my friends and I, other photographers take one look at it and we just go, it's not good. It's just not there, not there, not there, not there. Not to say the photographer couldn't do it if they didn't have any distractions, but it's not there. And it's just because the public doesn't know. And they think because something got a bunch of likes that it's good, or someone has a bunch of followers that their work is good. It doesn't really correlate that way. If they're happy, awesome. That's really all that matters. And photography in the grand scheme, is it that important? Is it going to change the world? I don't know. If you're good enough, maybe you will. So more power to you. Question number 3. I have a question. It's boring. Maybe it's been asked. That's quite a sell you have there. Let's say one day I get really good at my photography. See, people are wanting to get good. How and where do you make it happen to sell photographs? I always see someone I've never heard of and a local sports photographer showing they have images they sold to Getty. Does that mean they've made it? Do you sell them or license them? Please ramble on about the topic for a minute if you like, so I can set goals and dreams to make work that is good and that people want to pay money for. P.S. I am too selfish for babies, so I have time and energy for this. Thank you for making videos. That is hilarious. Too selfish for babies. When people ask me if I have kids, I go, no, I'm too immature and too selfish. And most of the time they either look at me with a look of horror, if they're kind of the snooty version, maybe if they're in the publishing space and they're wearing a velvet smoking jacket and have a pipe, they will be like, oh, how ghastly. But then most people go, that's actually really funny. And I'm like, I'm being honest. I'm too selfish and I'm too immature. My wife, yesterday, I was playing jump rope with 2 local kids in the driveway of my casita with a piece of wire. And I got these kids playing jump rope and my wife goes, you're a maniac. Like, how did that even happen? And I'm like, cuz I'm an immature. Those kids took one look at me and they go, yeah, he's 6 feet tall, but his brain is the same as ours. We're on the same playing field. And that to me is one of the best aspects of me as a human being. There's a lot of questions in here. How do you sell photographs? But there's a lot of ways of selling photographs. And Getty, wow, that in itself, that is a loaded question. You should go back and research the history of Getty Images and the professional photography world, because that has been, at times, a very, very rocky road. Agency work now, for the most part to me, really is on the decline. It's been on the decline for a long time. A lot of agencies were merged. A lot of agencies went under. The value of imagery went down. When you started to see things like royalty-free and microstock, that just decimated the industry. Then came along wholly owned content. It destroyed the industry in so many ways. It will never recover from that. Oftentimes, I think people are far too anxious to sell their work before they get good. You have to ask yourself, why would someone buy this? Am I actually a good photographer? What have I done that's different and interesting? What is unique about this work? How am I packaging it? Am I doing editions or not doing editions? Am I selling through a gallery? What percentage is the gallery taking? Can I have more than one gallery? How do I even court a gallery? Can I get a gallery to talk to me? Do I want to sell in a gallery or do I want it to do it myself through an online gallery? You have a gazillion things, but the question to ask first is, why on earth am I trying to do this? I think if you're just doing, set a realistic goal. Let's say that you want to sell 1 print a month for a year. Just try to sell 1 image a month. That's like a starting goal. Choose one size of print, 1620, 1722, depending if you're a digital or analog photographer. Choose a size like that. Do an online gallery. Research your pricing and make it realistic. Do not try to make a living by selling photographs. That is incredibly difficult. Even the people that I know that are very successful in the fine art world, they're selling photographs. That's a big part of their monthly nut, trying to cover it. It's a stressful existence. So again, the number one thing you have to do is learn how to make unique photographs so that when people see them, they go, wow, no one else has work like that. This is a unique piece. This has value. That'll take a lifetime right there. Then think about that. And it's good that you realize that you're selfish. That's good. Because if photography is what you want to do, you're going to have to be selfish. I really think that, unfortunately. The two go hand in hand. Okay, what was that? That was number 2. Number 3. Okay, that was 3. Here's 4. Hey, Dan, I have a question that maybe, hang on a second, I gotta write this in here so I don't miss this, because I will. This is 4. Did you see how nimbly I used that keyboard? I just was like, it was like Phil Liggett when the tour is on and Lance is dancing on the pedals like a ballerina. That's what I was doing with the keyboard. I have a question that may be a candidate for your upcoming Q&A. My question is about pre-visualization. Do you think pre-visualization is a skill that can be developed or honed, or do you think that it's something you either love or you either have or you don't? It seems to me that pre-visualization is a common and essential thread woven throughout all of the arts. Capturing the ubiquitous, I think he meant to say decisive moment, can happen by accident with a little luck, but being able to see it long before it happens to bring everything together, or in the case of studio work, seeing what you want in the mind's eye and being able to put it together. This is what separates picture takers from Instagrammers. Yeah, Instagram is about content. That's not photography. Instagram is about metrics. If you think that brands or clients are looking at your Instagram work and looking at the content of the photo and saying, wow, great photographer, they're not. They don't care. They're looking at metrics, demographic, location, followers. It's soulless, lifeless, but that's what it is. Photography is a whole separate thing. So pre-visualization, you're actually talking about 2 flavors of this. The first one I do not agree with, and the second one I do. When I see and hear the word pre-visualization, it takes me back to my newspaper assignments back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I had a degree in photojournalism and I was working full-time as a photographer at newspapers, and I was doing daily assignments, and it was incredibly stressful. There were days that were magical and days that were absolute pure hell. Sometimes you caught yourself trying to game the system. I'd go in and there'd be a stack of assignments and I would start looking through them. Okay, this one's at 8:30 in the morning. I've got a 10:30, I've got a 2, I've got a 5, I've got a 7. It could be a pro. I'm shooting the Phoenix Suns with strobes in the arena. There could be I might accidentally stumble on a house fire in the middle of that. And then like some guy from the city in front of a building or a lot where a building is gonna be in horrible light. And you're like, this sucks, my life sucks. Why did I become a photographer? One day I was reading an assignment, and it was about some dance thing. And in my head, I was talking out loud and I was visualizing what I was going to see. And this older photographer came in and he's like, don't do it. That is a complete waste of time, because you're gonna get there and nothing is gonna look like what you visualized, and then you're back to zero. Just go and react to what it is you see. And I was like, that's really true, because it never looks like what you think it's going to look like. It's never, and even oftentimes it's not even remotely close to what you think you're going to see. So all that pre-visualization can bring you up to making you think you're going to walk into some incredible scenario, and then you get to the city council meeting and they decided to have it in a broom closet with an overhead fluorescent, 4 people around a table, none of whom want to be photographed. And so you've got your magenta filter, your green gel and strobe, and you're like, this sucks, my life sucks. Why did I visualize this on like the deck of a yacht in Cancun, right? Doesn't make sense. The second part of this question is the second part of pre-visualization is true, which is when you're in the field and you suddenly begin to sense that the ingredients are there for you to make your photograph. That's exciting, because then it's not even pre-visualization, it's prediction of the pieces on the board in front of you and saying, that guy's gonna move here, she's gonna go here, I need to be here. You are mentally fabricating this piece before it happens. That's really fun. Other times, reactionary, bang. There is no visualization whatsoever. It's until the instant you realize the photo is there and you better be fast and get it, and boom, you get it and you move on. And then you think to yourself, if you're shooting film, you're like, God, I hope I didn't screw that up. Can I even say anything? I can't even mention it to anyone, because then if I mention it and I don't get it, because they're gonna come back and they're gonna ask me about it, and I'm gonna have to like backpedal and say, oh, I was just kidding about that. I didn't really get that shot. I was just like thinking to myself how cool it would have been to get that shot, but I wasn't that good. I don't know what you're talking about. Leave me alone. That's the kind of thing. So don't pre-visualize a job until you get there. 2, when you sense that moment, you can start to begin to predict where the pieces are gonna go. And 3, you could just have a reactionary photograph, but don't talk smack about it until you're staring at your negative and know you had it. You're welcome. You're welcome. Number 5. Nice, thank you. I like questions that start out with just a random thank you. One of your answers spurred a question. What I love, if you can fit it in somewhere sometime, when you talk about creating, curating, and preserving an archive of original work that you can license now, whenever, and forever, What kind of work are you talking about? More specifically, I have a feeling that whether we're talking 20 years into the future or an hour from now, there will be no line of people waiting to ask to license work I currently do to help clients sell their products on social media or in online stores. Spill it, Milner. Would you? Question mark. P.S. I'm officially asking for a third episode of Dear Photographer. Yeah, I'm working on third episode of Dear Photographer. That's hilarious. Okay, so will there be people licensing work from an archive? Yes. What kind of work are you talking about? Well, what I'm not talking about is the kind of work that helps clients sell their product on social media. That's content. We've all had to do it at some point. A lot of us are still doing it. You're selling stuff, content. That stuff is gone here today, gone tomorrow. No one's ever going to have any concern or interest in that work whatsoever. What I'm talking about is the photography that is shifting history, culture, and society. And you may or may not be photographing that kind of work, and there's nothing wrong with it if you're not. For example, I'm looking at a book over here that I was looking at this morning called Blood and Honey by Ron Haviv. Ron, that was a book, he spent 10 years covering the war in the Balkans. Ron has made at least 2 photographs in his career as a photojournalist that have changed the world. Legitimately ripple effect of changing society, culture, war around the world. That is an incredibly rare thing. I mean, incredibly rare. That work, and those 2 images, if I describe them to you, you would know them because they are part of the fabric of global visual culture and because of the impact that they had. That is the kind of stuff people will be licensing and buying those photographs for the rest of his life and beyond. My friend in LA, Greg Gorman, who shot the picture of Andy Warhol on the wall behind me, Greg Gorman was a celebrity portrait photographer, still is, for 40-some years. He's one of the coolest, most generous, most awesome people I've ever met in photography. He's been photographing people in LA since his apartment was so small that the celebrity or the musician had to go inside the apartment. He would have the front door open and had to stand outside to photograph them because the place was so small. He went from that to having one of the truly iconic West Coast mega studios. And he, again, is one of the coolest people ever. He has an archive of celebrity portrait that will be licensed from now until eternity. That is an incredibly valuable thing, and he owns, I'm sure, I've never had a direct conversation with him about this specific aspect, but he owns everything outright. All of those images are his. That's what I'm talking about, building an archive. If you are going to work down on the US-Mexico border, and you are willy-nilly firing stuff off on Instagram all day long, and you're spending 2 minutes making pictures and 2 hours on Instagram responding, you are never going to make anything of value that's going to be around. If you want to go down and you want to do a project on the border, David Taylor's book, Walk the Line, Work the Line, something like that. It's 2 books in one in a slipcase. I believe it was done by Radius Books in Santa Fe. David Taylor is a photographer who specializes in the border. That is a project. That is a body of work that people are going to be referencing forever. That is what we're after. That is the difference between a photographer building an archive and a content producer. Now, I've worn both hats. I still produce content now because it's part of my job, but I spent 30 years of my life being a photographer and trying to make work like that. I have a couple of projects that would be in that archive. I don't really care about selling stuff, so my archive, if I burned it all tomorrow, I would move on. And I want a Yamaha TW200. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Who cares about my archive? But if you're trying to make one, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, let's see here. I think I got another question. This is number 6. How do you engage with photo documentary project subjects while remaining morally distant? In other words, how do I approach a project and establish a working relationship with people who I completely disagree with morally, politically, and socially? I have the opportunity to document a group of people with great stories that the world does not know about and hasn't been documented before. There's the opportunity to tell a story of a fallen empire, of extremists who are now operating in the shadows while trying to best to recruit the youth of a specific group of people. Okay, I'm going to cut it off right there because that's a great question. How do you photograph people that you're morally opposed to or socially opposed to, or every ounce of your fabric of your being says, I can't stand these people? That's not your job. To steal a line from one of the greatest cinematic achievements in the history of motion picture film, Under Fire, Nick Nolte, in prison in Nicaragua, gives a cigarette to the guy in the cell next to him, and the guy says, what side are you on? He goes, I don't take sides, I take pictures. Like that, this guy got goosebumps. I got goosebumps that are hidden underneath my Beyond jacket, Modus jacket. It's not your job. If you're a documentary photographer, you go and you document. You make the best possible work you can to have the most impact, and you put everything else aside. And the other thing is, you may learn something from these people that you didn't know. I can guarantee you're going to learn something you didn't know. There's going to be a wrinkle, an angle, a flavor of that's going to make you stop and rethink your own beliefs about what you thought before you thought it. See how that worked? I just made a circle, and now I'm a bit dizzy. I'm going to hang on here. Yeah, you just go. You can't, if you're only going to photograph the people that you're in the same camp with, what's the point? You know, it's a great question. I equate it to American politics. I have friends on the right and I have friends on the left. And I have friends on the left who only associate with people on the left, and I have friends on the right who only associate with people on the right. They don't want to read anything that's not right-wing. They don't want to associate without right-wing. And anyone who's not in their little clique is the enemy. And the same applies to some of my friends on the left who are so far left they can't see daylight. They think everyone on the right is horrible and bad, and they're lined up in these trenches. I'm in the middle. I have friends and family on the right. I have friends and family on the left. And I know people in every shape in between. And I talk to everybody. I ask questions. I am not shy about expressing my own opinion. But I do it in a way that is professional and practical and pragmatic, in some way where I'm like, okay, if this is how you believe, I'm questioning you. I'm not confronting you. I'm questioning you. Explain it. Like, how do you feel that way? Talking to somebody the other day, and they said that their father was, they were convinced that the vaccine had a tracking device in it, right? I don't believe that, but I'm curious as to what would make them believe that. So we have a conversation. I don't point fingers. I don't call names. I don't say you're crazy. That's how we got where we are. Drawing lines is how we got Donald Trump. And that was not a good thing for anyone, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or independent or anyone or just a citizen of the world. That was not a good thing. And I know that because we had 4 years of track record to prove it. Doing doc work, I have done a ton of stories where I was like, I have nothing in common with these people. I don't believe what they believe. They're not exactly friendly. They don't want me here. But guess what? That's my job. I'm going to be here and I'm going to document. And then lo and behold, vast majority of the time, by the time I rolled out of there, I wouldn't say that we were besties, you know, but we were like simpatico. They had a better understanding of me and I had a better understanding of them. And then hopefully you take that knowledge and you pass it on and you spread it into the community so that we're not digging lines in these trenches, which is so idiotic. Little political bent here. If you support any political party in America to 100%, you're ignoring decades of like indiscretion. So like, let's just be honest about it, fix the system, make it better, and move on. So pace yourself, take your time, go in with an open mind. If you do not believe the same thing that they do not lie and go along with them to get photographs. Just say, look, I'm not on the same page as you. I'm here to make pictures, but explain to me how you feel this way, why you feel this way. And I'll be as middle of the road as I can with you. Alrighty then. Number 7, what kind of time are we running here, people? Where's my assistant? I don't have an assistant. I get asked all the time if someone can be an assistant. You'd be bored out of your mind if you came and worked with me. Hi, Dan. I have a question regarding printing a photography book magazine with bilingual paragraphs. Here's my situation. The book magazine is personal. Only my family members will see it when they visit my house. Most likely everyone in the family would understand it if I printed only in English. However, I want the magazine to have a bilingual paragraph since the magazine is about a trip to Latin American country and want to leave a trace of my Latin culture for my kids to read in the future. Great idea. When they read the magazine, the problem is encountering is that a bilingual magazine book limits me to write shorter paragraphs or extend the amount of pages the magazine will have, 50 pages already. How do you recommend that? I don't necessarily agree with that. I think, one, I'm totally in agreement with you doing bilingual. I think that's really smart. It's how you design it. I think you could always do a secondary publication that has, just do one version in English and do a second version in Spanish. That way all you'd have to do is swap out the copy blocks for Spanish and English, and boom, you've got 2 pubs. That's one idea. Or 2, just design it in. I mean, I don't know, you might increase your page count a little bit, but a magazine page limit is 240 pages, and it's a gorgeous looking publication when you get up to 240. I've done it one time, it's beautiful. But I think that's it. I think it's all about design. I don't know how much you're writing. If you've got 80 pages of copy, that's one thing. But think about doing 2 versions, one in Spanish, one in English. Kind of cool. In fact, I want to do that now. So that would be my first take on that. Question number, wait a second. I think you actually went on and talked a little bit about this. 50 pages already, you could, bilingual, writing paragraphs over photos could be an option. Splitting the magazine in volumes, keeping each at 20 pages. That's basically what I said, but I was just doing a separate issue in Spanish, which we have done in the past. We've done magazine projects at Blurb where we had French editions, English editions, Spanish editions, that kind of thing. Okay, moving on. Question number 8 is, how did I run my wedding business? So I'm going to lump this in. Let me see what kind of time we're at here. God, we're at another 30 minutes. Wow, I think this battery's going to die soon. How did I run my wedding business? So my wedding and portrait business was what I would call atypical. I didn't operate like a standard portrait wedding photographer. In fact, I really didn't want anything to do with that industry because it was such a stigma for me when I was doing my other kinds of photography, which is ridiculous. It's not fair. There's a lot of wonderful photographers working in the portrait wedding industries, but because it has such a stigma from the past, the commercial side of photography, the professional commercial side, would always look down on portrait wedding photographers as if they were photographers that weren't good enough to do anything else, which is ridiculous because a lot of those commercial photographers would fall flat on their face if you put them in front of a wedding client and vice versa. So I worked my wedding business. All of my fees were paid before the wedding began. So when someone booked me, they paid half of the fee up front and they paid the second half a week before the job started. So all the finances were out of the way. I would not have to go up to someone during the day of the wedding and ask for a check. That's horrible. I also had a goal of doing 10 weddings a year total. I would never do more because then you become a production line, and everybody who did a ton of weddings, their work all started to look the same over and over and over again. You would hear things about photographers saying, oh, my assistant does the edit for me. And basically that assistant potentially is going through and just randomly taking every third image because every job looks exactly the same. I didn't work that way. I worked with a Hasselblad and a Leica. I would sometimes come up, a total shoot, maybe 200 images total. And there were wedding photographers and teams that were shooting 10,000 images at weddings in a single day. And for some weird reason, that was being celebrated as if it was a good thing. That's a ridiculous thing that is based on technology and is the worst, dumbest thing I've ever heard for somebody to shoot that much during a wedding. There's simply not that much action. And if you're shooting 10,000, it shows that you don't know what you're doing. So you're looking for key moments and key elements. I would also say to people that you're hiring me not only to do the photographs, but you're hiring me to edit this work because you're not people who edit all the time. You're not looking at photographs on a daily basis. You don't know what I'm after when I'm shooting. So you're hiring me to shoot it, edit it, package it into a book. The book was my decision, my control. I would not let clients design it because then the books would balloon and they would just start to look like regular wedding books. I did not want my work done that way. I was also very militant about who I worked with. Clients had to be a certain kind of person that I think we would relate well together. We had similar aesthetic taste and design taste and photographic taste, and that was very important. You only want to do the jobs with people that you are connected to. The rest of them, no, and it becomes a burden. And weddings now, I'm so glad I got out when I did. Weddings have become so over the top, and I think that that's partly to blame to reality TV, which is reality TV and Bridezilla and shows like that, where it gave people license to act like maniacs, like just really unsavory people, and I didn't want to be anywhere around that. The people that I worked with in weddings were just fantastic people. A lot of them I'm still friends with. A lot of them went on to have children, which I then ended up photographing the children. I did my my children's business the same. I was submitting some of the children's work to an agency called Masterfile. They were syndicating it worldwide. But sometimes I would just do private commissions. I would shoot with a Hasselblad or a Fuji 6.9 or a 4x5, or sometimes with the Leica. I basically treated them like documentary projects. All the money was paid up front. I didn't have no fee up front and then charge people $300 for an 8x10. I just said, give me a decent fee up front to do the shoot. What you do with the work afterwards is on you. My goal is to put the work on the wall. From a single shoot, I'm looking for one photograph that's good enough to live for eternity through your life, the kid's life, your grandkid's life. I want this to be on the wall forever. That's my mentality. That's why the Hasselblad was such a great tool, because it allowed me to look down through it. I could get right up on top of people The 6x6 negative is beautiful. And the cool thing is that my prints are hanging all over the place because of the people that I've photographed that way. So that is hard to encapsulate an entire business in that timeline, but that's, at least if you have follow-up questions about the wedding stuff, what else can I add? I worked with a planner in Santa Barbara, a planner in Palm Springs, and a planner in Hawaii. And I worked with them a long time, and I would say to them, look, I'm only looking for this kind of client over here. All three of the planners considered me the weird guy, the odd guy. When they had what they called an artistic client they didn't really know what to do with, they would send them to me. And 99% of the time, those people and I would hit it off because they were like, oh, you're not a documentary photographer. When we would meet, when you're not a wedding photographer, when we would meet in person, I wouldn't show any wedding photographs. I would only show documentary work. And if they looked at it and said, why am I looking at this? I wouldn't do the job. If they looked at it and said, oh my God, this is cool, are you gonna make us look like that? I would say, yes, okay, we're on the right page here. So just little filters to make sure you're getting the right kind of job. Number 9, while doing long-term documentary projects, I find it hard to stay focused the whole day. And every day I'm working, I try to pull back a little from my subject to read a book, meditate, or relax, but I feel guilty for not working on the project and potentially miss photographs that would help tell the story. Have you experienced something similar? Should I just grab that beet powder and plow through? I'm a big fan of beet powder. It will definitely help you plow through. I didn't know about beet powder when I was working as a photographer. I wish I would have, because I would have been mainlining that stuff in the car all day long, or in the van. I'd have like a beet powder van. The bed would be stained purple from the beets. Each situation is different. We all feel different. If you've ever been on a doc project in another country and you get sick, and you're tired, and it's 110 degrees and you don't feel like working, but you know you have to go because you've got access to get something and it's not going to happen again. Each one of these things, in hindsight, it's what makes doc work so great, is that you're a human being, I'm a human being, we're photographing human beings, and everybody has intangibility. And sometimes those mesh, and other times they are in direct contrast or conflict with one another, and it makes it incredibly complicated. I mean, I've waited around for days, trying to get access for something, days, and then you realize it's gone and you're never getting it back, and you just wasted days. So you do what you can, and if you need to take a break, because if you're not and you're wasted and you're out there, you're probably not doing a service to anyone, including yourself. Okay. That's it. This battery's going to die. I'm going to end it at 9, and I've got one question left over, and I will be back. Thank you for your questions. I'm one person with one opinion, so take it for what it's worth, and I appreciate you sending in your questions, and I will be back with another.